Here in the Diocese of San Angelo, Texas, we spend a lot of time driving. And I love our West Texas highways. I love the beauty of the wide open territory. I love the colorful sunsets, the interesting hills, and the wildlife. And in general, we have very good roads here in this part of the world. Of course, a couple of hundred years ago, our roads weren't that good. There were plenty of rocks and brush and prickly pear cactus and high spots and low spots. It would have taken a long time to get from point A to point B before we got these really good roads. Well, in today's readings, we have the repeated image of the creation and improvement of roads in the wilderness. It talks about cutting the high places down low and filling in the low spots to make them level ground. It talks about making the rough ways smooth and making winding roads straight. And that image of road preparation and road improvement comes from the practices of the ancient Near East. Because in those days, whenever a king would visit an outlying district in his kingdom, they would have to clear a road for his chariot to get there. Because if he didn't clear a path, then he could not arrive in his chariot. And so that image serves as the basis for what John the Baptist says in the gospel today and what the prophet Isaiah says in the first reading. That's where they get this image. In the desert, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the wasteland a highway for our God. God is coming, and you need to prepare the way for him to arrive. And all this road work is an important part of Advent from a spiritual perspective. We clear a smooth path for the Lord to come and enter into our world at Christmas. That's what we're trying to do in the season of Advent. Of course, Jesus doesn't need smooth highways in order to arrive into our lives. The point here is that we need to prepare the way in our hearts and in our world in order to be ready to receive the coming of Christ our King. There are mountains of social sins that need to be blasted away. Things like hatred, prejudice, superstition, racism, and injustice. And there are hills of personal sins of commission that need to be cut down. These are things that God tells us not to do, and we choose to do them anyway. And then we also need to fill in the valleys of our sins of omission. These are those times when God calls us to do something that's right and good, and we choose not to do it. That's a sin of omission. And then there are those crooked paths that need to be made straight. Things like cheating, stealing, injustice, and lying. And then we also need to clear away the brush and the trees and the rocks. These would be things like our sin, our selfishness and our pride, and misconceptions. Isaiah says, the rugged land shall be made a plain. That means that the rugged edges of our character need to be worked on. And we need to grow in virtue and holiness so that we can better reflect the love of Christ in the way we treat people. And like with any road improvement project, we need to fill in the potholes. Those potholes that need to be filled in would represent wounds and resentments and anger that need healing in our hearts. And then if you're going to travel down the road, you need to have enough fuel to get where you're going, right? And the fuel that we need to travel this road represents the sacraments, especially the Eucharist and confession. They are our source of strength for the journey. The grace of those sacraments keeps us going down this road between our human hearts and God. Remember, the highway between the human heart and God is a two-way highway. The good news of Advent is that it's not just we who go toward God, but also God comes toward us. That's the main point of the waiting of Advent. We're waiting on the fact that Christ is coming to us. God enters our world so that he can draw human hearts to him. And so in this season of Advent, let's work on that highway between our human hearts and God. Where the highway already exists, let's improve it. And where there's no road, let's build one. In the desert, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the wasteland a highway for our God.